Good morning to everybody, and thank you very much to the organizers for inviting me to this excellent opportunity. I would like to present you a work that has been done in Slovenia regarding pharmacodynamic research on Iboga plant. Iboga plant is African perennial shrub that has in its root bark group of alkaloids, familiar alkaloids, which are of indole family, and Ibogaine is the highest percentage is in the form of Ibogaine. So we studied the pure substance of Ibogaine from the reasons of repetitivity of results and experiments, since biological material has its fluctuations regarding content of alkaloids, but the fact that we focused on pure alkaloid doesn't mean that Iboga as a complex drug is not efficient. By contrary, I personally expect that it's even there is behind it there is some synergism and other ways of pharmacodynamic that are also very important. And the people that have tried both forms say that this natural original material is even somehow more colorful and vivid, and the effects are a little different from the reason of synergy of this group of alkaloids. Iboga, as a dried powder of powdered root bark, second layer, has been used for long centuries. The origin is not exactly known. Information comes from mythology. And it has been used as a traditional medicine as a tonic, stimulant, health protector, and also as an aid for reconvalescence after infectious diseases. In tropical areas, infectious diseases like malaria and many are severe illness that have a long and can be very exhaustive. So a period after elimination of germs is called reconvalescence, when you're no longer sick, but you still need to get to your health back. And Iboga in traditional medicine is recognized as an aid to fasten this process and to get a well-being, to reach well-being more efficiently and easy. Besides mentioned indications, Iboga in a higher dosage is used as a ritual substance in a socio-cultural manner, where ingestion of Iboga, a sacred plant, bois sacré, is considered as a rite of passage through which young child or adolescent is recognized as a full member of society, as an adult, a person that reaches adulthood. The rituals itself is a very complex series of preparations, the ingestion itself, and also the whole tribe supports a candidate. It's very colorful, vivid cultural event with night dances, fires, and here on the picture we can see the candidate taking Iboga, and Iboga is different expressions are used, different terms are used regarding the effect of such substances. Such I would choose Entheogen state, which is defined as a state similar to dreams, but with a kept awareness of yourself and what is going on. Also, one of the words to describe the way of the nature of the substance is also entheogen, which means etymologically that we're talking about a substance that awakes divine in a person, in Theo, to find a God in you, in yourself. The most pejorative expression that I'll try to avoid, but I'll use it here just to point out what I'm talking about, is the old expression hallucinogen, which doesn't tell much. Hallucinations, by definitions, are something that you have disturbances of your visions with eyes opened, for contrary to illusions, and Ibogaine or Iboga doesn't do any hallucinations. When you have your eyes closed, you have visions. That's the most close effect that could be. But hallucinogen is used too negatively in a context, so I would like to avoid this kind of expression. Iboga is a visionary drug that helps or gives or passes to a person ability to deal with the past more approach than the memory enables us to see a present in a very aware way, more aware that we are usually aware, like in a state that we consider awakeness, and to debate, to enable you to debate with yourself or with spirits, depends on the vocabulary that you use, with the future. You consult a future, you contemplate about the future, about the possibilities, and the outcome can be that you are able to choose and decide for your future and to see the opportunities. Addicts mostly don't see much of bright future usually, and Iboga opens up eyes in a way like a child sees things. Everything is possible. You get this information, this feeling, in fact. Ibogaine is not unknown to Western medicine. The most known usage was in France. It was registered as a Lambaréné. Lambaréné is a town in Gabon where Albert Schweitzer established his clinic. So it's named by that town. It was in pharmacopoeia, but with very low dosage. It was 8 milligrams per pill, and it was indications were against general fatigue, depression, and again at reconvalescence after infectious diseases. Maybe very well known are pilot experiments of Chilean psychiatrist Claudio Naranjo that has used in 60s and 70s moderate doses of Ibogaine as a fantasy enhancer that enables, catalyzes the inside, the process of psychoanalysis, shortens up the process, helps getting better outcomes. At this point, it's worth noting that it's not just the substance that has its effects. We always have to talk about the dosage also, especially with the substances of this kind. Often the effects are very different with a small dose, medium dose, or high dose. And it's true again with the Ibogaine or Iboga. Small doses have a somehow just stimulant, awakening, like a tonizing the body and the mind effect. The medium dosage are somewhere between, and the big dosage is completely other story. It facilitates a person becomes lethargic, lays down, enters more his inner world, turns into the introspection, with the closed eyes has what he thinks. It becomes more and more vivid with the dosage, and it's contrary to let's say in Gabon in past they used small doses of Iboga for help with when they were hunting lions, and it's not possible to hunt lions with a big dosage. Then lion would hunt you, in fact. So I would like to point out that the doses that we are talking about when we're talking about addiction interruption, there are doses between 10 to 20 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. So this comes on average, if we're talking about 70 kilos person, around a gram plus minus. And this dosage with Claudio Naranjo, 4 or 5 milligrams per kilo, are the doses that a person is still not in a mood to lay down and to resist to the interview, but it's still the dose that is possible to communicate with the person. Well, it's possible also on high doses, but the observer interrupts the process. The one that took Iboga is not in a mood to talk too much. He's not unconscious. He can be asked about things. He's aware what's going on. But if we leave him alone, he enters a REM-like state. It can be eye movement with the closed eyelids. Rapid eye movement can be observed. So this state is in fact oneirogenic. It's a dream-like state, but with kept awake dreaming. Nowadays, in the West, Iboga or Ibogaine is recognized as a help, or as a, then again, to use the expression drug. Drug. Is it a medicine? It would be a medicine if it would be accepted as a medicine, if it would be inscribed into the pharmacopoeia. My personal belief is that it is a medicine, but it's not yet a medicine. It should be a medicine, but work has to be done first to bring it there. But people have a different points of view and opinion about it. In general, definitely, experience as such is promoting and helping for personal growth, spiritual growth. Also we have a religious community, a sacrament of transition that uses Ibogaine as their principal right. They consider Ibogaine to be a holy sacrament. There has been a report for use with in extreme sports. So for a period of time, Ibogaine was also on a list of controlled prohibited substances by the Olympic Committee as doping. There has been a research and interest of army of Legion of Foreigners, French Légion étrangère, and the most loud and the most known and the most effect that's been the most mentioned recently, and recently doesn't mean in recent years, but it's already in recent decades, since 70s, 80s, is interruption of addiction. If we focus on this. First, in the beginning, there has been some damage done because the yellow print came out with a miracle cure for addiction, etc., etc. No, there are no miracle cures for addiction, but there are good help substances that can help regarding addiction. So recent consensus in this field is that Ibogaine should be considered as a addiction interrupter, which means that it's not, of course, a person after Ibogaine can and they do relapse. It's not 100% thing, especially not in these circumstances as they are now, because the field is rather unregulated. The protocols are not well finished, But all this can be settled. If the Ibogaine would be brought to the public health, to the institutionalized, being supported, and if the persons, the clients would have a proper pre-treatment and aftercare, the outcomes I personally expect might be good. In conjunction with other therapies, it would be a really benefit about it. Of course, it's not a magic pill. In the beginning, it was said, and for a long time it has been worked like it is, that a person comes to a treatment provider, stays there a day or two, takes Ibogaine, or even not that a person just buys Ibogaine through internet or whatever, takes it at home, and now everybody, the family, everybody expects that this person won't even think about the drug of abuse ever again. Of course, that's not the truth. The Ibogaine is addiction interrupter, which officially reduces, at least it reduces, if not even completely eliminates symptoms and signs of abstinence syndrome. Now depends, if a person is on a low heroin dose, we can expect that this diminution will be almost complete. With methadone on a high dosage, we can talk about reduction of abstinence syndrome, but real reduction about reports, people report about, they approximate it about, they say like 80% of abstinence syndrome was gone. I just had some couple of chills. I felt a little tired for a day or two, and after that it was better, versus the situation after big methadone dosage where abstinence syndrome can last weeks and insomnia can last months, etc. The other effect observed with Ibogaine treatment is elimination of craving that can be found for a prolonged period, which means that it has a kind of prolonged effect, and I would address this elimination of cravings more to the psychotherapeutic aspect of Ibogaine, not the direct biochemical aspect of Ibogaine as a molecule acting on a body, but to a psycho-spiritual experience where a person finds through this state of visions a possibility and a faith in a future. And this can help them, that this possibility of using drugs as an alternative to life, normally with addicts that see only black future without drugs, is normally very, for them, a reasonable option. So after Ibogaine, we get a whole range of possibilities for life, which of course have to be conducted and done and supported. But at least we got a faith that things are possible, and not just faith, but the concrete steps, concrete facts and knowledge about how things can go. This is what some call about spiritual intervention. That depends from which kind of background you're coming from. If you're very religious, very Catholic, very New Ager, or a complete atheist, or maybe materialist with just science on your mind, normally you use different kind of vocabulary, but they all describe the same thing. We would say in psychological terms, we would say that it's so-called insight into your problematics, what is in the present, and also insight into the possibilities for future. Someone with very religious background will say that it was a divine intervention that helped him and gave him a hint what to do, how to do things, how to ameliorate his state, and how to win this battle against drugs. Somebody with a psychoanalytic background would say that it was a subconsciousness that helped him to deal with these things. So, in fact, it's not important the terms that we use about this, but the fact is that it is very contemporary state of mind that brings us not just knowledge, but also a physical awareness, physical testing of possibilities for the future. Ibogaine literature, scientific literature on Ibogaine dates already from the first studies, but not exactly about the action in addiction, for addiction indications, are old. But regarding addiction, there is since 80s more and more articles. Now it's on PubMed something more than 300 scientific articles on the subject, but practically all of them on a preclinical study. So we don't have much data on human, scientifically double-blinded with scientific methodology. Of course, we have a lot of data in the lay literature, on internet, in publications, semi-professional, professional, but the very science indexed journals, it's about 300 articles. And the first focus was the action of Ibogaine on pharmacodynamic researches on Ibogaine. That's mostly on Ibogaine's action on receptor systems. And it's very, very diverse, data is very diverse. Ibogaine is known to affect numerous enzymes, receptors. There is an agonist on one side, antagonists, transporter, influences the transporters of neurotransmitters, etc. And we can talk about the immediate effects, which means that after ingestion, it's taken per os, and absorption, it comes to the brain, to the different parts of body, and it acts on the receptor sites. Probably these visionary states are mediated through action on these brain structures. But what is interesting with Ibogaine is that we can observe also prolonged after effects. People report about amelioration of depression, better mood, but not in a drug-like, illegal drug-like sense. When you take, I don't know, cocaine or something, you are in a high mood, but in a manner of stabilizing the mood, prolonged well-being, physical strengthening, and mental and psychological optimism. And since the Ibogaine, it is true that it is a lipophilic molecule that stays a little longer in the body, it eliminates slowly, and it can be traceable for days after oral ingestion. But this model of lipid deposits couldn't support these effects that sometimes are reported for months or even years or even lifelong. It's not so rare that people are talking about life-changing experience or such. So these prolonged after effects are. It is suspected that some kind of gene expression pattern change is responsible for such a long-term alteration of this state habitus, personal habitus. Every cell in a human body, every individual has his own genome, and all of his cells have the same genome, but the cells don't have the same expressional pattern. This pattern means that some genes are in one cell dormant and the other genes are active, and in the other types of cells, different set of genes are active. So we all have every room has the same facilities, television, climate, and everything, but different things are turned on and turned off. So the Ibogaine we were chasing, we suspected change in these expressional patterns, and we decided to test Ibogaine on an animal model. The cell is composed of nucleate acids that carry the information, the data, the genome. And proteins are divided into the structural and functional. So structural are somehow keeping a form of the thing. They're building blocks, the whole morphology. And functional are different, let's say, enzymes that, we'll see that later. Structural proteins, let's say, are cytoskeleton of the cell. The cell itself has a net of supporting tissue. A lot of proteins, structural proteins, are also outside the cell. In the skin, we have collagen, intercellular matrix, and so. And the smaller part of proteins are functional proteins. The most known are receptors. Let's say there comes a neurotransmitter on the receptor and changes its conformational structure so that this signal goes on and things happen. Very diverse things happen after different triggers. And on the other hand, we have enzymes, proteins and enzymes, which we have numbers of enzymes dealing with the metabolism and dealing with anabolism and catabolism. That means destroying of a substance or building the substance. As we said an experiment on a rat model. The rats were treated with Ibogaine at a dose that has been reported to be effective in human regarding abstinence, regarding addiction. So we used 20 milligrams per kilogram. Just to briefly present the methodology, how we have chased the changes in proteins in rat brains. Proteins are results, are outcome of genes. Each gene codes the protein. This protein can be, as we said, receptor, enzyme, structural, whatever, but we followed the gene expression pattern changes through changes in a proteome. Proteome is a word that describes the whole range of proteins that are in one cell, let's say, or tissue. So the methodology, the thing was as follows. We have treated rats with Ibogaine. We had a control group and treated groups. One treated groups was sacrificed 24 hours after the application of Ibogaine, and another group was sacrificed 72, that means 3 days after the Ibogaine. The brain was removed, it was homogenated, and the proteins were extracted from the tissue. Then these proteins are interesting molecules because they are charged or can be uncharged. They can be positively charged, uncharged, that means neutral, or negatively charged. So the methodology we used is so-called two-dimensional electrophoresis. Two-dimensional because we first divide proteins according to their charge, how positively or how negatively they are charged. And the second step is to divide this mixture on the left by their molecular weight. That means how big the molecules are. This here, the great thing is polyacrylamide gel. It's a net of microfibers that exert a certain resistance to the movement of proteins. So in the first instance, we put this mixture on a strip.
Excuse me.
Yeah?
Excuse me. You need
Yeah.
more time.
We put the mixture of proteins on the strip, and we put this strip into the electrical field, so that the negatively charged proteins goes towards positive pole, and the opposite on the other side, and neutral stays in between. Then we put this strip above this gel, and then we apply this electrical field in the second dimension. They drag these proteins down so that the small one go faster and the bigger go slower. And the result of such procedure is as follows. This is a scan of a gel, and these spots are proteins. a group of proteins of one kind. Of course, it's not just one molecule. One molecule wouldn't be seen. One spot is a type of proteins, and this spot is bigger. It doesn't mean that here there are bigger proteins inside. As we saw, the smaller proteins go down, but it's more of these smaller proteins. That's why the amount of the protein, total protein, is bigger here. The proteins are made visible here by staining by silver. So we used special software that is made for analysis of these things. So the basic point of this kind of experiment is that you make a gel of a control rat, and then you make a gel of treated rat. And then you just supreme them one above another. And you can do that by eye, but eye is not current enough for small changes. This is why you use software. And software shows us which spots, because these two are similar but are not the same gels, which spots are after the treatment with Ibogaine bigger. That means that the protein of one kind is there is more of protein of one kind, or smaller, which means induction of a special gene for a protein or suppression of a special gene for protein. It's like this. And then you see, and then you get a change. We can take number 3. You can see that a spot is bigger. What you do next is just to cut out from the gel a spot, extract again the proteins out, and then comes identification, because from those spots you don't know what kind of protein it is. The data is still growing on this. These maps are being formed but are far from being complete, that you would just know by the, like in Atlas or on a map, you can find the position of a thing and you know which it is from the previous experiments. So we still have to work on a identification of proteins. And it's used mass spectrometry, which cuts by a trypsin cuts these proteins in smaller pieces. They go through mass spectrometry. You get a special fragments that are already known. You compare them. It's a statistical work. Compare them with data banks, and you get the results with a probability. Science nowadays is coming more and more in the probability field, and not especially in this kind of things. So you have a threshold where you can consider one spot to be identified. That's called score. If a score is about 45 was a threshold here, it is statistically significant that you have identified a protein, that the spot is that enzyme that is known, that does this, does that, or receptor for this or that, or whatever. So what we've got here are, in fact, it turned out that enzymes of glycolysis have been inducted. That means stimulated. Synthesis of them has been stimulated. 24 hours group had just a slight induction, but we can see later on a 3-day after Ibogaine, we have more significant induction of these enzymes. After this experiment, we decided to repeat this experiment on a cell culture on a yeast, Saccharomyces, that's a baker yeast, in order to find out, is this effect mediated, is it specific to brain? Is it caused by influence of Ibogaine on receptors previously mentioned? Is it a consequence of that acute effect? Or is there some other way of influence of Ibogaine on this gene, directly to the genes? We know, let's say for steroid hormones, that they enter cells and they go directly to the promoter regions of genes, and they stimulate directly genes without affecting any receptor on membrane or something like this. Yeast is an accepted model for study of housekeeping primary metabolism. glycolysis is the very, very basic thing that is going on practically in every living cell, because it burning of sugars with oxygen into water and carbon dioxide is a heterotrophic catabolic process that gives a living cell an energy to live and to grow. So these very primary mechanisms are very similar to all eukaryotes. Bacteria has a little different, and of course plants have different because they have chloroplasts and they are capable of doing the opposite to get through sun sugar out of water and carbon dioxide. So the yeast is a very simple one cellular organism growing in cultures that is very easy to cultivate, and they don't have any intercellular or known intercellular communications like neurotransmitters and receptors and tight junctions. So this is a study directly on a cell, and it has been previously proven that housekeeping pathways, primary metabolism pathways, are similar to all higher eukaryotes, including human. So here we repeated the experiment, and we got practically the same results. We can see that the three key enzymes of the glycolytic pathway have been even more profoundly inducted, 4 times the amount of control group, and it was measured at a time point of 5 hours after application of Ibogaine. That means even quicker. As mentioned before, glycolysis is a multi-step process where the outcome of glycolysis is the ATP, the yellow molecules. They are energy-rich molecules that represent storage of energy to the cell, highly available storage of course, glucose is also storage of energy, but it's more far away. If you need energy immediately, cell always uses, in the last instance, it uses adenosine triphosphate, which has a very high energy bond, and it can be used to do whatever, or to support transmembrane potential in neurons, for growth. That means anabolism, to build things and to grow. Can be used for movement in the muscles, etc. So, the question arose: where does this induction of energy-related enzymes, glycolytic enzymes, come from? What is the trigger? So we measured the level of these energy-rich molecules, ATP molecules, after Ibogaine in the same model in yeast, and we have noticed that immediately after application of Ibogaine, the ATP pool, there's a mistake, milligrams should be here. ATP pool falls in a dose-dependent manner. We can see 1 milligram per liter, 4 and 20, goes down to the relatively 40% depletion of ATP in a molecule. So, because the first question was, is Ibogaine, it is known that it's lipophilic molecule that can penetrate membrane, goes easily through. So one possibility was that goes like steroid hormones directly to the genome and affects certain genes, this group of energy-related metabolism genes, or is this induction secondary, which turned out to be true? Is it secondary to the transient denivellation of energy and the reactive induction synthesis of enzymes that are responsible for the production of energy of ATP molecules? So this answer, this graph showed us that in fact, first event to happen after Ibogaine is a fall in ATP, a fall in the energy pool, and that the induction of enzymes is a reaction of cell on when the cell senses that it is low with energy, It has mechanisms to promote regions and cascade of phosphorizations, which lead to first transcription of genomes for these proteins and then translation into the proteins itself. So, new question arose. Is this fall in ATP in energy pool after Ibogaine a consequence of lower production of energy or bigger consumption? Because it's a dynamic balance, it's equilibrium. The niveau of water, this is illustration, niveau of this water is amount of pool of ATP. So we saw that this niveau fell down, so there are two possibilities. Either somebody opened the exit pipe or closed the incoming, the niveau falls. The second step of experiment gave answer to this. ATP is in mitochondria. ATP is synthesized in mitochondria, and the byproducts always are free radicals. About free radicals, we hear a lot. They cause damage, oxidative damage. They cause aging, etc. And they are byproduct. Mostly, it's a byproduct of energy production. So, if it would be that the energy production is smaller, then there is lower production of reactive oxygen species, so-called free radicals. If it's bigger, it's bigger. So we measured the same circumstances, the same model yeast after Ibogaine. We can see up to the first hour when we had a profound fall in ATP pool, we got elevation of reactive oxygen species production, measured by special kits, which gave an answer that in fact we have a bigger production. We have a bigger production of ATP, but at the same time lower amount of ATP, which means that the only possible way to lower it is that the consumption of ATP is greatly enhanced. So we made an analysis. What could be the reason for such who consumes this energy? And it turned out, when we analyzed the data previously shown with that software for analysis of gels, that in a low abundance fraction, that means proteins that are represented in lower amounts, which are typically functional enzymes, that fraction is about 70% elevated, which means that we have a severe going-ons in the cell. Something is actively being synthesized, changed, metabolic turnover is fastened. How to connect this with addiction therapy? We must point out that when somebody uses drugs for prolonged time, the whole milieu, the whole constellation of cellular ratio between enzymes, receptors, everything is remodeled according to the presence of a drug. So the drug, on the first instance, its effect wears off because the cell itself becomes adapted to the presence of drug. That is so-called tolerance. And if the drug is suddenly eliminated from the body, then this new constellation of functional and structural constellation misses drug as a component of the system. Drug becomes an elementary. Everybody who used and was addicted to drugs knows that it's like a food. It's a cure for addict, but cure in abbreviations, of course. It's a cure for a day or a couple of hours, and then when it's eliminated, it needs to reestablish that so-called cure for the body. So when somebody decided to stop with a drug, he enters the abstinence syndrome, and in that time, the cell has to remodel its functions and also structurally. And for remodeling of anything, its energy is needed. Metabolic turnover is needed to throw out the waste things that were there for the presence of drug, and to build a new one that support the cell when the drug is no longer present. So the cell has to detoxify. And if we have a bigger energy availability, and if we have a bigger metabolic turnover, these processes it is reasonable to assume that they are facilitated and catalyzed and fastened. This is how the abstinence syndrome is shortened by its duration and diminuted by its quantity, by its severeness. The signs and symptoms are down, are less present. So the continuing of this experiment was at this time point 0 is in fact time point 5 hours from the previous experiment. Yeast was in the presence of Ibogaine for 5 hours. The events took place. There was an induction of glycolytic enzymes, and we just washed away the Ibogaine from the milieu. You do that very simple. You centrifugate cells on the bottom, you pour that out, you make add a fresh nutrient solution. Repeat that 3 times. So thank you. There was no more Ibogaine in the milieu, and what we see the opposite effect measuring the ATP. The ATP, the energy arose in the cell. We have measured, 2 persons decided to take Ibogaine. We were informed about that. We asked them if they agree that we measure their bioelectrical field. Some call it aura, some call it differently, by Curie camera. That was a project from the University of Electroscience, so I participated there as an observer. But what turned out is very interesting. This is illustration of, in fact, you're measuring this electric, it's so-called, well, I'm not in methodology so much. You measure ionization around the finger, and then through some software you get this illustration of body parts by holistic approach, which parts of the picture represents topography of the body. But that's not important. We are not searching for special diseases here. We take a look in general. We can see aura just 40 minutes before ingestion of Ibogaine, which is a bit split with holes in it, and it can be considered as an aura of a stressed modern man. 3 hours after ingestion, when the Ibogaine is fully absorbed and the effect is maximum, we can see practically an elimination of aura. And 54 time point when these inductions of enzymes and everything took place. We saw in rats, it starts in 24 hours, and it's the most profound in 72. This is somewhere in between. We can make a parallel with this ATP pool. After the Ibogaine, there is a depletion of energy in the cells. And after the elimination here, the liver and the kidneys are already have eliminated majority of Ibogaine. We get up to 50, 60. We just measured a couple of hours. We see a gradual crescendo of energy, and the stories are go together. So what could be if we go into the brainstorming a little? That's semi-science, okay, but let's brainstorm a little. We have the first picture. This is like the first picture of addict, let's say. Those individuals weren't addicts, they were spiritual seekers trying to deal with things, but we can combine. We have holes in aura. So we have demons of addiction, or demons of fixed ideas, or demons of commercials, and what we have to do, how we have to be and behave, and who we are supposed to be. They are sucking our energy. Through experience with Ibogaine, there are 2 possibilities. One is so-called thantanosis, that a person it's so-called, Ibogaine session is so-called, also one of the aspects is like near-death experience. So maybe these demons are not interested in that corpse that is already dead. You know, there's no ATP in it. There's no energy. There's nothing much left to suck. And also, on the other hand, being without aura, which is electrical field, can be considered as a kind of Faraday cage. The same time protecting us, but the same time isolating us from surrounding. And if we open up this aura, we are also open to this so-called divine intervention. And the outcome is, as I said, the endured, strengthened person who knows and can stand for his beliefs with a strong Faraday cage around him and not being so vulnerable to the negative suggestions, manipulations from outside, etc. So, in fact, to summarize, enhanced energy availability supports higher metabolic turnover, and with that facilitates detoxification. And besides that acute effect and also prolonged effect of induction of these enzymes in brain provides mental agility, which is by itself forming circumstances for well-being and for understanding of the situation, and that help to take further steps that are needed to finally combat the addiction. Let me repeat, Ibogaine session is not the end of addiction. It's a beginning of the end. We can say that Ibogaine is not, affects also body, not just mind. And it's not just working on brain, but it affects really all cells, because addiction, Barrox said that abstinence syndrome is like you would feel every single cell of your body being suffocated. And it goes again together with the story. The leakage of oxygen is the same like leakage of energy, ATP. it results in the same thing. So Ibogaine works on all tissues, all species, and it's not mediated by binding to receptors as previously researched and so, even though this binding definitely has its place in promoting those acute oneirogenic states. And there's another important thing. Ibogaine shows remedy effect in different pathological conditions. Detoxification is not needed only in addiction. It's also needed after severe infectious diseases. Okay, just briefly, what is going on in the world? There is a published review article, epidemiological, which cites that in recent 5 years there has been 3,414 cases of documented cases of Ibogaine usage in the West, not including Gabon traditional circumstance, and that the usage of Ibogaine is becoming more and more recognized, and it's more and more people. It's fourfold increase compared to 5 years earlier. It's not just addiction that people are taking for. About the third is reason for a spiritual nature, and it should be pointed out that further research and also clinical trials are definitely needed, because death cases are known in relation to Ibogaine. In autopsy samples, there has been found Ibogaine. The role in the death process, in the cause of death, is still unknown, but it cannot be eliminated, especially because of prolongation of QT interval on EKG is sometimes seen with a certain genotype of people, which can result in cardiac arrhythmias. Prolongation of QT interval also has a methadone. It's known with cocaine. On the other hand, it's known as cyclic antidepressants and so, but further studies are definitely needed to work out the proper protocols to answer the question, is Ibogaine suitable for self-help? Because the same authors in the same article divided types of sessions into 4 types. medical model, like guidance model, self-help, which means or you buy Ibogaine or get it somewhere and you take it by yourself, which is absolutely out of question by my opinion. Like help comes under consideration and question now with findings, later findings. So the medical model would be the most appropriate, but it opens a lot of questions. Which doctor will be ready to be present? Who will take on whose sides the responsibility for it stays, etc., etc. A lot of legislation questions to be answered. And but regarding spiritual model, the fourth the thing is a little more moderate because the dosage with the spiritual is about a half of dosage needed for detox and reversal of abstinence. So also the worries are a little lower, but still not completely eliminated. So the guidance, let's say for a psychospiritual treatment, somebody with the same experience might, but I didn't say it is enough, might be enough, but definitely for a medical approach to the addiction problems, knowledge of first aid, the resuscitations and things like this, and also monitoring support would be best. But now there comes a question about who will pay, where to do, who will accept. I've been taught in a harm reduction manner. If somebody decides to take it, then it's better that we are with him. But we have to know exactly and to define exactly who decided to take it and who takes the responsibility if something goes wrong. This year, International Federation of Ibogaine Providers has been established. Quite good protocols are already established and done throughout to the public. But the question if they are obeyed, if people follow them, there is still no mechanisms to control the situation. And also in this field, there are a lot of providers that didn't even take Ibogaine themselves, but offer it as a way of earning money. So the issue is definitely hot and should be discussed. And on the other hand, some people would go straight to the prohibition, but prohibition turned out that it just pushes everything more. Even if something goes wrong, a person that is with a person that took it won't call an ambulance. If it's legal, you at least do search for it. There are numbers of issues which have to be discussed and well defined. Okay. The research was conducted by Om Institute with the collaboration of these faculties and institutes. Thank you.